Welcome to the next chapter.
Welcome, everyone, to our first episode of The Next Chapter. I'm Dana. I'm going to be your host throughout this incredible journey. And for today, I'm so excited to be joined by our three co-founders, Andy, Philipp, and Darryll. They are going to take us on a wild ride for the next hour, where we're going to talk AI in media and culture. But because it's a very sunny day here in Berlin and I kind of want to lay back, I'm going to ask my guests to introduce each other. Because not only are they amazing, but they also have shared interests and shared environments as well. And I'd like to hear from them. So, Philipp, could you please introduce Darryll for us today?
I'm more than happy to do that. Thank you very much, Dana. So, Darryll Colthrust.
Be gentle. Be very gentle.
I am. I'm setting the stage here for us all, for the entire discussion that is yet to come, that I'm really excited about. So, Darryll Colthrust is our co-founder and CTO. He is the technological mastermind behind everything that we do. He's been working for, as he likes to call it, donkey's years in digital transformation and particularly AI strategy. Has some background in private equity and pretty much knows everyone. So whenever you need any contact to any big names, Darryll is probably the one to call. And, but that's, a teeny tiny fun fact. Andy and myself, as we know Darryll for more than a year now and have been spending a lot of time with him, we have the feeling that Darryll might be Satoshi Nakamoto. I haven't heard anything else yet, but the word's out there. The word's out there. So that's Darryll.
Okay, I think you just made a statement that's going to break the internet, so thank you for that. The best way to start a podcast. And Darryll, great to learn more about you. Could you please tell us more about Andy?
Happily. So Andy is an amazing individual that I had the pleasure of meeting alongside Philipp about a year or so ago. One of the most humble guys, but incredibly creative. I think I remember the first time when I met him, I said to him, I was like, this guy's a thinker. His ability to be able to kind of process all the information that's going on around, and to just distill that down into a few words. And when he speaks, it's like, it's golden. Like you hear it and it's like, yep, this is a great way to just express all of the things that we've been thinking about. But he is, the co-founder and CPO, and it's exactly what should be expected from a CPO. Very visionary, incredible insight, very close to authors and publishers and basically creatives on a whole. He's able to channel them in ways in which none of us are able to, and I thoroughly enjoy working alongside him on a day-to-day basis.
Thank you, Darryll. I feel very humbled, but you're setting expectations really high now. So everything I say on this podcast has to be golden.
Yes, including the following introduction that is yet to come, because I thought my introduction to Darryll was good, and now you are kind of setting that bar. Andy, I'm listening.
Exactly. Please top that if you can, Andy.
All right, what to tell you about Philipp? Philipp is an amazing individual that basically complements the three of us, like in a total. You've already seen that there is some things that actually are complementary between Darryll and myself, and basically Philipp rounds up the whole thing by being a real visionary, a person who thinks highly strategically, but is also able to spark joy and to spark passion within people with the things that he says and that he talks about. So a real leader, a real person who is able to form a group of people behind him to work towards a common goal. So basically something that all of the communities we will be talking about are also about. So couldn't imagine anybody else like him in the position of the CEO of our amazing company. And on the other hand, I don't know anybody else being so good in Excel than he is. So basically, I may be good at Word and a little bit in PowerPoint, but he is an Excel aficionado. So very virtuous when it comes to using that specific tool, and also good to have somebody on the team who's good with numbers, right? Because it's not all tech and it's
Always.
not all creativity. In the end, it's also business.
Exactly. And please, with this co-founder team in mind, show me one that is better, because I don't think there's going to be a case.
I was about to say, Dana, sorry for interrupting that quickly. I wish my wife could hear that. I wish she could. But, you know, it's a podcast. She can at some point in time. So this is awesome. I love it already.
Amazing. She's going to be listener number 1. Cool. Awesome. Thank you for this incredible rundown. And I would say let's jump straight to it, because there's a lot to talk about. And our topic for today is going to be content personalization in the future. That already sounds so vague, but we're gonna drill down into it. But to set a bit the scene, the last few months, and we've all seen brought to market tons of AI tools that have been years in the making, really. So a lot of stuff happening in the background, and in the time span of a few months, they introduced us to this brave new world where almost every piece of content, every visual or technical idea is quite literally one sentence away from being reality. We have use cases that are booming in all areas of life, from art to music to work. It has the power of completely changing the way that we work. We essentially have our personal assistant in our pocket. And what we want to talk about today is, where will this all go in terms of content creation, in terms of consumption, and how will our realities transform? And with this in mind, I'd like to pose the first question, and this is to all of you. Will all media and entertainment content be personalized in the future? And Philipp, if you'd like to start us off on this ride.
So the question was whether or not all media in the future will be personalized. And to that, I'm pretty confident to say no. I believe that there is a massive development that we're currently looking at, and with generative AI enabling many new use cases for, again, content creation, content consumption, content monetization, like the entire value chain of content or media. And content personalization is probably one of the use cases that I'm most excited about. But there is and always will be a necessity for non-personalized content. So like there will be like the super high quality, high-end content that I don't see will be personalized, because people want to watch the same thing. But for the majority of the content, there are many use cases that will be possible through this newly available technology going forward.
All right, thank you. Darryll, what are your thoughts on this? Is there something that comes to mind where you're going to say, no, this will never be touched by AI? It's too complicated or too detrimental?
No. But I think just to answer that question as well, I agree with Philipp to a certain degree that all content will not be personalized. But I think this is where then you can separate out exactly what personalization means. So there's the personalization of the content itself, and how that may change. But then there's also the personalization of its consumption, which I think actually will be open to change for everything and for everyone. I personally believe, and actually again agree with Philipp on the view that there's going to be content that is actually, for lack of a better words, we'll have a license to basically say it can't be touched. It can't be changed. It can't be reformatted in any particular way. And I think there's going to be a lot more of that coming as a lot of the content starts to get edited in real time or post editing or however that happens. But I think that every human will want to be able to consume their content in the way in which actually that suits them. And that for me is still an element of personalization, and therefore would say, yes, everything will be personalized. The view of whatever that content is, or whether it's audio, video, whatever that is, may not change. in terms of the main context, but actually how they're consuming it will definitely be changing. That for me is like 100%.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And after all, we're all here making hypotheses with the best data that we have. And I'd like to hear from Andy as well on this point. If you believe that all media will be personalized, or if that is too much of a stretch.
Well, as you will notice, maybe also throughout that podcast, I don't like categoric answers. So all, definitely not. So there's always nuance to stuff, and we basically have to look at from different directions. In the end, I think with the emergence of generative AI, it will be way easier to personalize content, even on a content level. So what we see today a lot is curated content. So that basically you get recommendations by music platforms like Spotify or Apple based on your preferences. Also, Netflix is pretty good at actually just showing you recommendations regarding movies that you might like. But I believe that in the future, the content itself might be tweaked to your preferences. And I actually would like to stress the word tweaked. So like Philipp already said, there will be from my perspective personally, a base layer of content, so to say. So like the mother file that is the genuine story. Because like Philipp said, people would like to actually exchange their thoughts about it and actually enjoy the same content. This is what we do as humans. We enjoy stories and then we talk about these stories. But maybe on a smaller level, on specific things, this content might be tweaked. So the story that people consume in India might look slightly different because they have different cultural preferences that should be reflected in content. So basically reflecting the reality of their lives. There might be other groups within our societies that want to see their reality reflected in the content that they consume. So talking about the LGBTQ plus community, for example, or people like coming from different cultural backgrounds. So I think there is a huge opportunity in that working on a base layer, that specific details of stories in the end are basically tweaked to personal preferences. So it's not everything will be created one-on-one, but it's also not like we will just consume one-fits-all content in the future. It might be somewhere in between.
Absolutely. Thank you. This already gives us a great leeway in the conversation to come. From my perspective as a person that is trying to take in all the changes that are happening, I'm still wondering in the areas of news, for example, or broadcast or things that would be this sort of level of importance that is supposed to relay real time and as much as truthful information as possible, is where I kind of see AI maybe. I don't personally see yet how it's going to look like, but probably one of the ones that are going to be at least tackled later.
I think just to interject just a little bit there. So again, great examples from Andy. And I think just on that news point, and I think that's a really important point, especially when it comes to facts. And the realization is that today, actually a lot of the facts and news that come out is to a certain degree kind of personalized en masse when it's obviously being redistributed across different media channels, and whether or not it's a magazine giving a different spin on it or a newspaper giving a different spin on it. And I think it's going to be a really fine line, and you touched on like the dangerous aspects of this earlier on, but it's going to be a really fine line to kind of understand how best do we as a society and whoever's involved in this space as well ensure that when this information, whatever it is actually going to be disseminated to people, and the options that people have to be able to decide how they want to summarize this information needs to get to a point where we are not allowing everyone to effectively have their own version of the truth. same as how Andy was talking about, we'll have certain tweaks to bits of information. I think there's going to be some interesting topics to discuss, maybe not in this episode, but in future ones, of actually what information will be allowed to be summarized or amended or tweaked when it comes to factual information like news.
For sure, an entire topic in itself. And for now, I would say we go back to definition. And Darryll, you already touched upon this briefly before, but I'd like to define personalized media in terms of what it is and what is not. So if you'd like to give us a bit of guidance and your perspective on things.
So my perspective on this is there are varying levels of personalization, whether or not, as I mentioned before, that's en masse for a particular target group, or whether or not there is individual personalization. And there are a number of shades of grey in between, but those for me are the two main buckets. And whether or not generative AI is being used to create content or tailor content or tweak content specifically for an individual or for a market, I think it'll be able to achieve that. But I think that's for me is where I see that demarcation when it comes to personalization.
Okay, thank you so much. Philipp, do you have anything you'd like to add to this in terms of what personalized media means for you?
For me personally, personalized media is, it is a paradigm shift in terms of what we are able to consume, because we can create completely new use cases from individualized content in the style that we want it to be, with replacing actors, or we could do that you yourself are playing a minor role in some movie that you're watching, or some other experience that you're having. I mean, we're not talking about movies here only, right? We're talking about media experiences as a whole. So when I'm thinking of personalized media, I obviously see that the technological advancements in generative AI are enabling this, and I'm personally thinking, qua job title, I guess, about the opportunities and use cases that might emerge from that. But not only from a consumer point of view, because that is obviously something, we can talk, for ages and ages about whether or not consumers want personalized content, whether they want to be part in a movie that they're currently watching. I mean, that in the end, consumers will decide, right? We are in a very vocal society where people are voting with their feet by either using a certain experience or paying for that or not. And that's something that we will see. But I'm also looking at it from a business potential, as in, all right, just think about what you could do with truly personalized media, or let's call it for a second, maybe personalized adjusted media, where you have the space content and certain things are adjusted for your personal needs, maybe even preferences in terms of products that you are considering to purchase or anything. Obviously, we will talk about the business angle a bit later, I guess. But I'm personally thinking a lot about different use cases from the angle of the creators, of the users, and last but not least, obviously also by businesses who are trying to make money with that.
No, that's incredibly interesting, and it really builds a whole new world where everything is you sort of pushed out in a way, if that makes sense to say. I'd love to hear what you think the actual implications are going to be when it comes to our experience as well as a consumer. So all of us in this room here, we already look at different feeds, even though we're using the same app, so like we touched upon before, this is already happening a lot in the background. How is this going to evolve? How is this individualization going to look like in the future when this moves from the pure curation point to the actual creation?
That's
and Andy, yes, thank you.
I took this quite naturally.
Good.
So, well, again, there might be different options that we can have a look at. So on the one hand, there might be the vision of some that actually the user himself, him or herself, becomes a creator. So that you basically can have actively a say in what kind of content you would like to consume. So imagine a scenario where you basically say, hey, voice assistant, please create me a movie that. So as an ultimate thing, that might be interesting for some users. I don't know yet at this point, but there might some that actually enjoy being a creator themselves. The question for me then becomes, what does this creation experience itself look like? Because in the end, not the movie that he or she then consumes, or like the graphic novel or whatever type of medium, the podcast he or she consumes is the product, but the creation process itself becomes a product. And this is something that I really find interesting to have a look at. How can we actually help people become creators with a great UI and a great UX that is applied on a AI technology base layer? So that's interesting question number one. The other way around, you could say that people don't want to be creators because when it comes to media, they want to consume. It's something they do in their leisure time. It's something that they do for relaxation. So if they don't want to become creators, but content is tweaked to their preferences, who is tweaking the content? Or on which base is the content tweaked to their preferences? So it could be either the platforms that we already have, that we already see out there, that basically have collected a lot of data about you and just could tweak it and basically insert advertisement or product placements, talking business models, Philipp, based on your preferences. On the other hand, and now our Web3 or like community economy hypothesis comes into play, what about if you as a person could own that data about you and about your preferences, and you basically could use it cross-platform across all media platforms that you would like to use. But logging into these platforms, you can always have a say in, yes, I want the content to be tweaked to my preferences. Here is my data, please do so. Or you can say, no, I don't want that. And I think this is then a really, really nice example of an intercept between Web3 and the ownership of your data and your personal algorithm, so to say, and personalized media and AI on the other hand.
Can I just quickly say that I have goosebumps after this? This was on spot. This is exactly what we're trying to do here. It's, the creator economy on steroids, providing people with the right tools to come together and build something amazing, whether it's individualized or personalized content and providing them with a great experience along the way, or, by using these two amazing paradigm shifts without no intermediary in between, just giving the right tools, and, letting them do the magic. That's just awesome. I gotta say, sorry.
Can I just touch on something?
Absolutely.
So, touch on something that Andy was saying as well. So I think it's an interesting thing that we've seen over the years. That whole people who want like the 1% who are the creators, and the rest who are ready to consume. And I think, irrespective of how technology evolves in the future, there is always going to be room for storytellers, because the storytellers are the ones who are those visionaries who kind of always coming up with these initial experiences. And for me, I think when it comes to personalization, I believe that yes, there will be more and more people that would want to personalize some of their content, but I think that personalization is going to be something that is almost near enough intuitive to just the general human interactions. It's not going to be something that they're going to have to be thinking about every single day. Even with the example that Andy gave about, like wanting to kind of see a summary of, or hear a summary of the news for the day. I think as time goes on, a lot of the technology that we're going to have around us will just turn into that kind of ambient compute technology and ambient experiences, where there will just be a general understanding and knowledge of what's intuitively required by that particular individual at that time, so that they can actually consume the information that's necessary to them. And we kind of see a lot of that, with the rise of ChatGPT and a few of these other things coming in, where people are just having information consumed for them, and then they're able to just interrogate it as need be. But I think what's interesting there is that when talking specifically about media, I genuinely do believe that there's always going to be that space for the storytellers who will kind of be saying, hey, here is, my vision on what this thing is that you're going to be consuming. And I suspect also that there will be those same storytellers almost providing guided views of what those summaries are, rather than each individual always saying, okay, well, I've seen this movie or I've read this text. Could you please give me this in a personalized way, but based upon X, Y, Z? I think actually storytellers are going to become really, really good at using the tools that are out there to be able to help almost identify the most important or salient pieces of whatever content has been created, so that the generative tools are then going to be able to pick up on those things and not only just be relying upon the technology and their view on what they think the personalized content should be whenever it's been summarized or recut or reskinned or tweaked or whatever else.
I think this is amazing, but I want to play devil's advocate a little bit on 2 points that were raised, and the first one is this centralization versus decentralization of the information and how exactly our experiences are going to be tweaked, as Andy referred to them. So we have the more we push this personalization, the more there's a pull on data. And while there are things out there and there's people out there that started to appreciate the ownership, I would put the challenge that maybe most people don't, or maybe, who knows, even won't in the future care so much about this. So I want to get from your perspective, what are the things that you think are going to be centralized experiences, and what are the things that could potentially become decentralized experiences in terms of the media that we consume? And yes, Philipp, if you'd like to give your thoughts on this, if anyone else, of course, wants to contribute.
That's a tricky one. That's a really tricky one. There's obviously no binary answer as in, okay, this will be 100% there and this will be 100% there, because both centralization and decentralization have their advantages over one another. However, we believe that decentralization as a concept, just to start on a very, very high level, is something that is worth pursuing. Because when you have a decentralized setup without the intermediaries in between who are, who might or might not become too powerful, who might or might not, have certain policies that we agree or disagree with. So a decentralized setup without any need for intermediaries is something that we, as founders of CHAPTR, think is worth pursuing from a social and governance perspective. However, we are fully aware that there are certain things I'm talking business terms now, across the value chain or across the customer lifecycle or product lifecycle, are probably better off being centralized, and others are less so. For example, when it comes to like true innovation, like, this Steve Jobs is obviously like this one example that people tend to give when it is about, okay, who's the true visionary of our age? Then, Steve Jobs is usually the one name that you quote. I'm pretty convinced that we would not have the iPhone if everything was done in an truly decentralized way, without him being the one individual who's pushing for this very vision. However, at some point in time, and that's the reason why we are a Web3 company builder with a focus on media and generative AI, is at some point in time, there is value to actually decentralizing certain steps. So for example, content co-creation is something that we truly believe in. We believe if you give creators the right tools and the right setup, so in form of governance, the right technology, the right people, just bringing them together, the right incentives, then a magic will happen that will not happen in a typical hierarchical centralized fashion as we have seen it for the last couple hundred years that we are working within corporations. So long story short, this is a very vague and very abstract answer to a pretty concrete question, but I just want to outline that it's really, really tough to say certain things will be centralized and others will be decentralized. So it's not a yes no binary answer, but it depends kind of answer. Last but not least, I think when we are talking about the actual content and the actual experiences that we are as consumers seeing in the very future, there's also a wide variety of things that sometimes are better experienced together in a community, decentrally, with collaborators and co-creators that you're co-creating this amazing experience with, and then also utilizing network effects to kind of distribute and market this entire idea. And sometimes we will remain in a very centralized fashion where a Hollywood studio is bringing us the new, I don't know, Star Wars or whatever film that probably will not happen in that case in a very decentralized fashion. So it always depends. And last statement, when we're talking about decentralization, yes, generative AI is a tool that enables each and every one of us to express our creativity. For example, I would regard myself a very creative person, but I'm really not good in painting pictures. But now with all the tools out there, with DALL-E 2, with Midjourney, and all this other great stuff that is out there, I can suddenly express my creativity even in a visual way. So AI basically enables creativity in each and everyone's minds and can also enable a very decentralized content co-creation. And that's exactly why we're building CHAPTR. However, the tool of decentralized AI, it's like per definition extremely centralized. So you need high computation power, which is it's like centrally stored. You need this algorithm, this AI algorithm that needs to be trained, which is super duper expensive. So this is also centralized at this very point. So yes, we are talking a lot about decentralization and enabling creators, enabling communities, but there is a very, very high level of centralism in that basic idea, simply because the tech is centralized at this very point.
Absolutely. And what is the most important to highlight here is exactly where, like you mentioned, these decentralizations can happen, and for people to understand how it's going to evolve, and that there are some areas where it's great and you can participate and you can do things together and reap the benefit, whereas there are others where this centralized management is much better. And to keep in mind that this concept of Web3, or all the terms that we're throwing in here, is ownership as well as participation, which is a big key if we really want to create things together. And this brings me to my second point that I hung on to until now, which is what Darryll, you mentioned about this more and more sort of ambient creations popping up. And my first thought to that, and please fight me if I'm wrong, but it took me to a more passive audience, or passive individuals that kind of are spoon-fed everything, and we're just gonna lie around and chill and get over our stuff in the blink of an eye. What do you think that this is a possibility, or what are your thoughts on this evolution of more ambient creativity versus the individual creativity?
Good question. And I'm just going to give you one hot take just on the last one, just to say, there will never be full decentralization. I just want to make that abundantly clear. Like, it just doesn't make sense. And it is a fallacy. to the points that Philip made before, like there's certain things which are great about centralization. We are human beings. We like order. We like convenience, and there will always be some element of centralization. But there is definitely a place for decentralization, and I think that nicely then kind of leads into your question on the ambient consumption. So I have to be very careful how I say this.
No, don't.
Take your time.
It's entertaining. Just spit it out.
Think about the dungeon. You will be taken back there.
I believe that when it comes to human beings, we love convenience. That is just a fact.
Full stop.
And the reality is that if someone is going to be able to produce something, create something, help me manage my algorithm, or help me manage, my views on, what I should or shouldn't be seeing, we will take it to in some way. Now, I believe that there is, I hope, let's put it this way, I hope that there will be an increase in the general society's acceptance of the reality that there needs to be more agency, and there needs to be a more active participation in what they're consuming. I don't believe that we have the appropriate channels to be able to really act upon whether or not something that we're consuming is actually good for us or not. And it usually requires like a massive uproar and a whole bunch of change and some massive scandal to come out before everyone realizes, oh yes, this platform over here was flooded with a bunch of generated content to basically sway an election one way or the next, or all of the content that is being consumed on one particular media channel is fully left or fully right, and we just consume it passively. So I'm hoping that as time goes on, more avenues of agency are being created, so that the passive consumers in the world today are given, not given that opportunity, because the opportunity is there. They are activated in some way to be able to feel like they should give a voice in terms of what they are viewing and seeing. And I think this really lies to the heart of our principles around the use of artificial intelligence and generative AI within the media space. We genuinely do believe that humans need to still be in the loop when it comes to how content is being trained, when it comes to
the front door doorbell.
it's the wonders of working from home. Like there's always someone coming to the door.
Yep.
But yeah,
It always makes the experience a bit more human. Sorry to interrupt,
Yeah,
but
no,
that's
no,
what
no,
I like
It's
about
a
it.
great way to
it's
say
fine.
that we're a fully remote company as well, but that's just, marketing.
There you go.
But yeah, no, I genuinely do believe that. I think there just needs to be human in the loop, not just from how content is being selected for for the data that needs to be trained on, because I think there needs to be a lot more selection around that. I think there needs to be a human in the loop for how content is being trained, and that reinforcement learning from there. But I also think there needs to be a human in the loop even when it comes to the content that has been generated, so that we have that traceability, we have that input across the board, so that even if we have a bunch of continued passive consumers, that at least we, as the people who are generating content or the technology providers in this space, are doing something more than just, hey, let's just scrape the internet, we'll do the bare minimum to remove hate speech, but everything else, it's up to you what you do and what you consume. I think that's going to be a very, very dangerous space for us to be in. Whether today, tomorrow, in 5 years' time, I think that's just a general principle we should be applying.
All right, this was incredible, and also I really appreciate that you raised the flags on what needs to happen in order to prevent things that are now very much discussed in the current media. And my train of thought here was, so you mentioned it has to happen, of course, at the core level of the technology and what it's being fed and how we manage that. But then we have, outside of this component, there's the component of the intermediary. So in the world that is not decentralized, we have the media and entertainment companies that are at the moment running the show, so to say, and will most likely continue to do so. I'd love to hear, how do you think that the role of these companies is going to change? And also from this perspective of activation, I really like that word, Darryll. How can the companies as well maybe do something to activate the people instead of feeding the passive experiences? And here, Andy, I'd like to start off with you. I know it's a very big one, but important nonetheless to at least tackle the service.
100%. I believe the role, or let's put it differently. Let's say the mindset of large media corporations has to change. Right now, they are gatekeepers. They're basically choosing content, curating content, and it's smart people making the decisions. But from my perspective, it's not always clear and transparent how they make these decisions, and sometimes it might just be personal preference in the end. So from my perspective, it would be great if a mindset, if a shift in the mindset happens, that these corporations see themselves as enablers for creativity and as enablers for communities. And this again touches on the question that we have been tackling before. If you think about really, really successful story worlds, and so I'm not talking about just stories, but basically story worlds, the most successful ones are, I don't know, look at Marvel, look at Harry Potter, look at Star Wars, even Star Trek, if you prefer that. I don't, but
Get him off the podcast, please.
Yeah, I'd like to keep him.
I'm sorry, I didn't know. I was invited.
No. If you look at these, what makes these story universes live and breathe? It's the fans, and on the other hand, it's the creators who created all that stuff. So let's think about a more inclusive way of these two actually working together and actually collaborating to building out these story worlds, because they all should have, at least in some kind of way, have a say, because they're all part of that story ecosystem, if you would put it like that. And also when it comes to news and other forms of media, I think if a media corporation says, well, I'm an enabler, I'll just provide the technological base layer and maybe some proven governance models, and also provide the knowledge that we have gained over the years when it comes to storytelling or news production, and just fed it into a community of that like-minded people that like that specific idea of that story world, or like we are building a news outlet, that this could add a lot of value. So basically have media companies transition from a very, very centralized approach to a rather decentralized approach, without getting rid of all the good things that have been accomplished throughout the years, because there are things that just work and that can also be applied in to a certain extent decentralized ecosystem, where the creators on the one hand and the consumers on the other hand all have a say and work hand in hand.
Yes. If I may quickly add to this from a business perspective, so 100% agree with what Andy just said. I mean, let's take Netflix as a prime example. So how does usually the business model of Netflix work? So They acquire paying customers, they pay subscription. Now they allow for ads to kind of cover the massive fixed costs. And the key position in the P&L on the cost side is content costs, because content creation at this very point is super duper expensive. They have to have these high quality content to not only attract people to buy their service, but to also retain these consumers on their platform. With this new technology out there, which basically takes the gatekeeper out of the equation on the one hand, so basically communities could come together and co-finance, co-create, and co-own a great creation, which then could be shown on Netflix on the one side, but also with these new generative AI tools out there. And I'm not saying that generative AI at this very point can create Netflix-like high quality content, but at some point they might be able to do that. The content costs will decrease significantly, like massively. And this on the one side is pretty good for Netflix, because then they decrease their cost position in the P&L, and they can create higher margins and produce more content for everyone, and hence create this flywheel that consumers will stay on this very platform. On the other side, however, if we think this through, if we think that now communities can replace the gatekeeper and can co-creating amazing high quality stuff, and it is done in a very effective and cost efficient manner, then at some point in time we will realize that there will be direct to consumer content or direct to consumer experiences. So not via the distribution partner Netflix, Disney Plus, or whatever's out there, but communities deciding to kind of distribute it in a direct to consumer fashion. Whether or not this will be happening and whether or not we'll be seeing this is something to see, something to discuss. But I'm pretty confident that these two paradigm shifts in media will have a massive impact on the current media industry, on the current big players that seem untouchable at this very point, simply because content costs and the way how content is co-created will change the entire game.
And again, let's be really clear on what we're saying here, though, that when it comes to bringing in the community into these spaces, like, this is not an easy thing. We're talking about a significant change to how work has just generally been done across the board in almost all industries. And I think the idea of starting to include communities into the day-to-day, into the decision making, it's going to take time, and there'll be lots of mistakes made. I'm going to say the crypto term, but we've seen kind of what's happened there, and what happens when there's like little to no regulation. There are lots of bad actors, and there've been lots of great things, but actually lots of really crappy things have happened to a lot of good people, and what we don't want to see is, obviously, as we start to bring more and more community into the general workings of creating content, we don't want to see those bad actors coming in. And I think one of the things that we're looking at is actually how do we start to not self-regulate in terms of legislation, but actually how do we start to really include the community, but in a structured way. Because we believe, yes, there should be those visionaries, as we talked about at the very beginning, and that kind of core creative team. But actually, how do we start to include more of the community in, so there's this a genuine sense of ownership in terms of what they're doing and collaboration in the creation of content. I just think more, it's going to take time, more effort needs to be put into it. But the points that both Andy and Philipp have made, both from a creative and business perspective, I think needs to be given a lot more airtime in this coming phase, as we start to see content production costs kind of going down, people actually being able to create their own content, and it's gonna just get better. I mean, we saw when YouTube first started, there was really silly videos of people kind of experiencing and kind of exploring, and they were kind of just, what could I do, what can't I do? The technology was still growing in terms of the use of of mobile phones and so on. And then actually, as time has gone on, some of the content that is actually generated by users is really, really good. And generative technology is going to allow a lot of these users to have tools in their hands to be able to create some really, really incredible content that will be on par with what you see on Netflix. And let's just be clear, like, all of the stuff on Netflix isn't great. I have tons of examples that I can share with you.
Okay,
what's your really bad content?
Favorite one? What's your favorite one, Darryll?
So my favorite one, even though I actually quite like it, but it's a recent piece from Korea, which I've enjoyed actually at the moment, on finding the greatest body from 100 people around the space, and they all battle it out to try and understanding like whose physique is better based upon different things. It is mindless TV, but just highly enjoyable. But at the same time, just probably something that we should scratch from this podcast so that no one knows that this is the stuff that I'm watching.
I think it's okay for people to see that we are also watching this kind of stuff. Okay, it's fine. You're not alone.
And you haven't
There's
seen it yet.
Why are we
You
talking
haven't seen
about
it
we?
yet.
We're not talking about we. We're talking about Darryll.
I'm with him. I'm sorry. I'm not gonna.
No,
I'm not gonna
it's
apologize
fine.
for
Actually,
it,
we should be
but
interrupting each other a lot more, actually, because this is quite fun.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess all I'm trying to say, really simply, and we can scratch out all the other stuff that I said before. Really simply, generative technology is coming, and communities are going to have the opportunity to be able to create incredible content, whether or not they do it individually or whether or not they do it as a community, and that content is going to be rivaling the existing production stuff that's coming out today. And actually, it would be sensible for a lot of media companies to actually start to get close to these communities, start to bring them into the fold, so that we can figure out new ways in which we can do content collaboration, co-creation, but also look at both centralized and decentralized distribution models, because the reality is, in, I'd say, less than 5 years, the quality of the content that will be able to be generated by the generative tools is going to scare a lot of people in terms of the art of the possible.
Is it 5 years? Is it 5 years? I mean, okay,
Yeah.
you've spent so much time in this space, right? But so for you, like the latest version of, I don't know, Midjourney is probably not that impressive. But when I talk to friends and family who are not that technologically advanced, and I show to them obviously ChatGPT or just Midjourney, they are like their mind is blown. And obviously, it for us as we spend so many like years in your case in this very space, obviously it feels like in 5 years we were there. But honestly speaking, I think this exponential level of realization of people who are just like they have taken their breath away by this amazing technology. This is happening today, not in 5 years.
No. So just to be, again, very, very concrete, I'm talking specifically about video. So we're talking about Netflix.
Okay.
I'm talking about video and the ability to also be able to create games and those kinds of experiences on the fly, real time. In terms of the level of fidelity that's required, that's more what I'm referring to. Static images, absolutely. A lot of the world still isn't even aware of what's possible with Midjourney. Obviously, ChatGPT has kind of put a lot of this stuff on stage, but again, like very, very quickly as OpenAI start to consolidate their tools, as with most others, and obviously we've seen Microsoft come up with the Bing ChatGPT integration that actually, yes, a lot of this stuff is going to become mainstream, but that's text and that's images. We've been talking about that for as I like to say, donkey's years. We are there, give it another 6 months. We're going to have to actually start trying to actively find ways to be able to know whether something has been generated or created by humans, and from a legislative perspective, because of the impact it's going to have on society, upcoming elections, all that kind of stuff. We're going to see a serious explosion. but actually, when it comes to the content that is stuff that people will sit down and consume for like 3 hours, which is usually, the video, whether it be lots of short videos or one long video or gaming or any of that kind of stuff. I think it's going to be like another 5 years before we can get to that level of fidelity where it's going to be easy for any consumer to just create something of that studio level quality to be able to use.
But this specifically makes it even more important, I guess, for every person working in media out there. So if you're listening, look into that stuff because it will have a massive impact. And so especially also the large media corporations out there should actively think about how to use these technological tools within their processes on the one hand, and on the other hand, how to open themselves up actually for their consumers. Because like, again, coming from a product and consumer perspective, I think there is nothing more valuable than having your consumers close to you and actually working together with them instead of just seeing them as dumb sheep who just should consume content, but actually let them have a say. So there are a few companies out there already on that path, integrating their feedback and actually having the consumers closer to them. And I really... What did you say? Yeah, CHAPTR, right. So this is from my perspective
as well,
the way to
don't
go.
forget.
Yeah. Okay, now everyone understands why I love working with you guys. So there was a very simple question. It was like, okay, where does decentralization, actually happen? And we pretty much have the entire view on the media industry, like the voice of reason, technological advancements, roadmap, always have customer centricity. This is awesome. We should do this every day.
Exactly. Let's do it, please. And it was awesome to see also the separation that all of you made between what could be and what is and what will be, because these are very, very different states. We all want to make this tool as beneficial as possible, but there's a lot of hurdles that were mentioned here, from the attitude and the position that the big companies are going to take, how the technology is going to evolve. And for me personally, to add a bit on this one, when I had a big shock also coming from the product background and Netflix, with all these things at their disposal, right? It didn't happen yesterday. It's been already available for quite some time, but their product decision, their business decision was, okay, let's just roll out a subscription model that is very much like cable TV. We just put it a bit lower price. And that, from my perspective, would have been the last resort, given how many other things could have been done. So this puts me a bit in the opposite direction when it comes to, okay, what kind of position are they actually going to take, and how are they going to integrate all of these technologies and their customers to create all the stuff that we discussed until now. All right, and with this in mind, which already covered a lot of grounds, but it was very focused on the movie part of things. And I think we can all agree media is much, much larger than this. And I'd love to hear, when it comes to music, when it comes to gaming, when it comes to books, they are also a huge part that we consume on a daily basis. What do you think the impact will be on these different types of media, and which of these industries do you think is gonna be most affected? And Andy, I would pass this on to you.
Like I just said, all of them.
Okay, thank you.
It's quite simple because, like,
right there.
And Darryll can definitely add to that, because like there are models out there for every kind of media already, and in the future these AI tools will also be combined, so that we will talk multimodal output and also maybe multimodal input, so in terms of how you interact with these. So from my perspective, there is no specific type of medium that will be let out of the equation when it comes to the application of AI and when it comes to working with their consumers. Some might be affected earlier, some might be affected later on, but in general, it has an impact on all of them.
What would you say is the one to watch out for at the moment? And this is for everyone, of course. What are you keeping your eyes on closely?
Well, the simplest one, and we're actually the furthest, is every medium that has to do with text and images. So when it comes to news outlets, when it comes to books, watch it. Because these models are already incredibly good and can do amazing stuff. And we should leverage that. Like every media company having to deal with text and image should do that. And in the end, when it comes to podcasts and audio, this is basically then just another form of output of created text. So let's see how we can incorporate these tools into our creative processes. Like Darryll said before, it's in the end, it's also always about human in the loop. So I also want to be very specific when it comes to the question, well, will all content be created by AI without a human having a say in it? I don't believe that. I believe that it is always a human who asks the AI to do stuff. So some call it prompting. And there is always a human who then decides what to do with the output. And so, like I said, let's embrace these tools in our creative processes and let's use them as sparring partner and tools.
So
Cool.
what's
Thank you. Yes, please, Darryll. From my angle, it would have been, something like music. Music is the coolest one for me. But thank you for the very detailed answer. Yes, Darryll, please.
I was gonna say, like, there are two questions. There are two things here, and I'll touch on just both of them just really quickly. So I agree with you. Music is definitely one of those because we're already seeing generated music kind of coming out as Spotify generated curation, all that kind of stuff, right?
Google just introduced music,
the text to
ML,
music
right?
as well. Yeah. So this, I think that, well, three now actually. So I think for each of these particular industries, there is going to be significant legislative changes that need to happen for each one of them as well. I think of the equivalent PRS, which is the audio recording agency that identifies whether or not you can play a certain piece of music within a department store or wherever else, and you have to pay a license for that. Like all of that kind of stuff starts to erode very, very quickly when the music has been generated. So it's, but also music obviously is one of those industries that have, in the near recent history have kind of gone through the Napster era, and they are, I think, one of the more prepared industries for the generative for generative technologies kind of coming in. Text images, like images, we see this stuff with Shutterstock. They're already part of the game. They've already been working with the providers. So they've been working with OpenAI. You've seen Adobe kind of entering the space now as well. That's already happening, and they've already embraced that change, which is again very, very smart from their perspective. It's now just around how you deal with that attribution when it comes to the creators. The areas that I think will be of the most significant disruption, I think definitely will be in video and definitely will be in gaming, just because these are some of the mediums that are just consumed quite a lot. You have the podcast space as well. Again, the ability to generate, like you look at 11 Labs, the ability to be able to generate audio to such a high quality, and you should definitely try it. Like I put in recording my voice for all of them, like a minute, and the quality of what came out again was really, really good. I took the readings from, there was a friend of ours who read a story for our children, and I took that, it was a 60-minute kind of recording, put that in, and actually the quality of the voice on the generated one was even better than his own original voice, which again is a weird thing to say, but you again start to realize just the implications of all of that. But the second point that I wanted to make other than the fact that all of these
Before you make your second point, though,
Yeah.
I think we can now disclose that you're not actually part of this podcast, but an AI is.
Find the cyborg. So you win this round, Andy.
But I think what's going to be quite interesting is we currently live in this world where, you know, like, there's a music industry, and there's the books, and there's images, and there's a film industry, and I think all of that's going to just start to blend very, very quickly, because now those specialisms that existed can now actually be quite neatly and easily integrated without all of the trappings that were there before. And I think there is going to be now a shift in what actually makes up a media company, because they will have all the generative tools to basically sit at a desk and just do all of it from that one place in theory. So I think that's going to be the most significant change. We will start to see consolidations where you'll see like video companies kind of buying up music companies because they want to now take in all of that back catalog to then be able to use in all of their future works. You'll see image companies kind of taking on and buying textual companies, because now they've got all of that IP around actually how language works and is structured, to then be able to generate an infinite number of just amazing images. So we're going to start to see a lot of this, what previously would have seemed odd, acquisitions happening across the industry. But that's my thought experiment on I think what will happen in the coming future as this technology continues to grow.
Love it, Darryll, love it. This 100% reflects my thinking. We won't have vertical specific media companies anymore, but 360-degree media companies. So basically enabling the creators to transmit their content in whichever form is appropriate for the specific content and for the specific customer need. This is what I've been trying to do in my previous job a lot, and which was done manually, so bringing creators into different mediums. And this will be a lot easier. So thank you so much for that thought, and because it just confirms what I was thinking. Thank you.
I mean, we have been working together for quite some time, didn't we?
I can see some patterns emerging here. I thought you were supposed to disagree with each other, but you seem to be all the time in consensus.
Yeah, that's because we were recorded. That's just because we recorded. In all seriousness, I mean, I think the points Darryll and Andy made are 100% on point. Yes, it will be every media company will be a multi-channel media company. So if you got IP, and whether it's, recorded IP via sound as a podcast or as a book, or something as a video, the gap to actually have a multi-channel content strategy from that IP, this gap will narrow, maybe even to zero, so that everyone will have the right tooling to utilize and leverage this IP across all platforms. And then, and this kind of is the role that I'm playing in this very setup as well, you also have the possibility to provide new monetization models as well, right? So, for example, we all know video is monetizing way better than any other medium that there is out there, simply because it feels natural. You see the brand, for example, when you're talking about advertising, which is quite tough, for example, in a podcast scenario. And hence you can kind of design a complete monetization model just for one content piece or for one IP across different platforms, across different mediums, which also gives much more power to the actual IP holder. So whoever owns IP and has the right tooling, this is the individual, or this is the community, or this is the business that will be in charge of the entire monetization across the entire lifecycle.
And I like that bit of actually including the community bit there as well, because it'll be interesting, as time goes on, you'll start seeing again acquisitions just for the community that has been built up.
Yes.
And again, taking the points that Andy had made before, imagine now you have a scenario where you have a company who's actually very, very good at activating a community, and then to the point that Phil was making, kind of monetizing them. And then actually it's not really, a media company per se, but actually they are a company that is a community company that's very, very good at activating, you can kind of then start to deploy them anywhere. That collective power becomes quite interesting. And especially within that kind of decentralized space, you now need to you can't just be frivolous with the community. You can't just play around with them, because they can obviously then shift and move to wherever it is. So it poses an interesting question for media companies, poses an interesting question for brands on a whole. But also, again, as this space continues, just normal traditional companies also use generative AI. They're also heavily reliant upon a lot of these entertainment industries, and we will start to see some of those kind of blends starting to occur.
Yes.
Which would be quite interesting.
I mean, let's be clear. The community setup as a whole
Absolutely.
is super interesting, because they're like, community members are A, the creators who are doing that stuff. They are B, the shareholders who are financing the entire thing, and C, they are the actual consumers, like the core consumer group who loves to consume this content, and even more, like D, they're the key marketers and distributors, and so on and so on. So this is quite a super interesting setup to include them there as well, and to take advantage of the flywheel possibility that you can have with these.
By the way, Philipp is also the person who has the conversations with the SEC and the BaFin about that stuff.
Oh boy. Oh boy.
Let's not go into that sad topic at the moment. What I wanted to add for this topic, which I think is fascinating, and the music communities that were built in this decentralized maze of Web3 are doing a fantastic job about building the collective spirit, about becoming a key stakeholder in what it is that's happening, and having newly built media companies cater to them, with them, for them. So the power dynamics, you can see, are clearly shifting there. And another thing that I found really amazing with all these collectives emerging that fit the model that you're describing is that as an individual, you're going to be able to come in and sort of plug and play into each of them without necessarily being constrained to one. So you kind of take everything that you want from one, and then you can move to the other. And it's going to be very interesting to see how this is going to evolve. But for sure, there's a lot of things to be done there. And with this, I would say we are ready to jump on the hot takes part. And for this, there's a few that are prepared here, and I'm gonna shoot one out to each of you, and let's see what you feel about it. And maybe this one to Andy, which basically says that AI will prioritize sensationalism and clickbait over substance.
Once again, please.
The AI, artificial intelligence, will prioritize
Thanks for explaining what AI is.
sensationalism.
Okay, once again.
You are more. AI will prioritize sensationalism and clickbait over substance.
What does ChatGPT say about that?
This hot take basically outlines one of the biggest threats that we also see in that space, and we've also tackled that already in the podcast. So it's actually good that this is formulated as a hot take, because it will cause a discourse and a discussion around that specific topic, and will help us as a society in general to find answers for that, because this is definitely something that we don't want to happen. But on the other hand, there was never a time in history when a technology that was deemed useful was just not applied, right? So we will have to find, as society, boundaries and guidelines how to use these tools and how we want to utilize them, instead of just banning them. And we will find governance tools and regulations to prevent this from happening. That's at least what I hope.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Now to Darryll. Your hot take is AI, or artificial intelligence, to be clear, will leave people jobless and will ruin our society.
Yes.
Okay. Do you want to develop a bit
so-
on that? Just for credit to the people,
I was
so they don't get wrong ideas.
I was expecting like some extra reaction and just a massive uproar. I can hear it now. It's interesting. I have this
Well,
is
we all
again
agree.
a nuanced one. So I think with any technological change, we've seen that there has been job loss. We've seen that in the industrial revolution. We're going to see that again within the space here as well. However, one of the things that I have heard consistently again and again from creators, from the technology providers, from anyone who's actually spent time kind of using the technology that's here now, and we've seen some of this in the past as well, is the people who are really good at what they do, and they don't fear the technology. They can immediately look at what is there and see how it can enhance what they do naturally and what they've built in terms of their skill set over time. We have a creative director, Mario, who, when he first came in, had tinkered around with some of the Gen AI stuff before, but actually now he was kind of doing a full deep dive into it. And initially, he was doing the general stuff that you see everywhere else. And as he started to go deeper, he was like, okay, well, actually, I can, if I just apply my own expertise in photography and in filmmaking and actually apply that now to this generative technology, I can now start to see a significant difference in the actual output. And we have seen that significant difference. It's like chalk and cheese between what I or Andy or Philip or anyone of the team can kind of go in and type in some prompts. And then when he's actually composing a shot or a still from a movie, but composing that through text and then feeding that into the technology, it is different, and you feel that when you see it. Same as when you see like an amazing piece of art or an amazing movie or an amazing piece of content, you read that and you can feel the essence, like you can see that in what gets generated. And he is easily and clearly understood that actually this is a tool. And what I would actually say for a lot of those who are fearing their jobs is to just use the tools. Go out there, give it a try. You'll immediately start to see, like where the boundaries are in terms of what it can do and what you can do. Because let's just be clear, the AI is not sentient. It is not knowledgeable from the perspective of being able to kind of just apply that without any instruction anywhere else. It still needs that human being and that's human intervention. So look at these things as significant advancements for how you can change the way in which you work and increase your output and your productivity. That's the way to think about it, so that you don't kind of end up in a situation where now you are jobless.
There's a very catchy
100%.
Twitter phrase that was on my Twitter feed and LinkedIn feed and everywhere up and down, which said, AI won't replace you, but a person using AI as a tool will. Yes.
Yep.
Yes. That's the perfect summary. I will leave it at that and move to the last hot take for Philip, which is that artificial intelligence will be the death of culture.
So the answer obviously is no. If we take AI as what it is, a new technology that we as humans can use, can leverage, and can use to elevate our own creativity, to express our ideas that we have in our head, use it in a way that closes the skill gap between me, who is very creative but not able to express myself using images or video or anything else, then I would even have the opposite hot take, which is saying AI is not the death of culture, but it brings it to yet another level, something that we simply haven't seen before. A creator community on steroids, where every single one of us who might be lazy, who might love convenience, but in the deepest core of our minds and beings, we are creative individuals who love to express ourselves. And with this tool being available to each and every one of us, not only to the average Joes like myself, but even to the Marios, like these super creative individuals who can create or express themselves very, very creatively already. This is again, creativity on steroids. And it is exactly what we have seen roughly 200 years ago when photography was invented, right? There were painters and they were painting beautiful landscapes where you were on holidays, or they were painting a picture of your beloved grandmother. And that was the only way you could kind of memorize that very moment or your beloved relative. And then suddenly photography came along. And this also didn't kill culture. It didn't kill the entire art of, drawing and painting pictures. But suddenly there was a more approachable technology that allowed each and every one of us to create photos and to express our creativity and to capture memories. Does that mean today, for example, when I take my iPhone out and do a quick selfie of myself, that this is, as culturally important and beneficial as something like our creative director is doing or any other professional? Then absolutely no. You always see the difference, right? But it elevates my own creativity, and I can capture a certain moment in a very creative way, powered through technology. And this is exactly what AI will do. It will not kill culture; it will elevate it.
Amazing.
Very well.
Thank you so much. It's a very optimistic and reassuring take that I think I had from all of you, which makes me incredibly happy, because I believe in your experience and in your vision, and this is amazing. And with this, I could say that my hot seat questions are over, and I just want to take a bit of.
No, your hot seat question. Your hot seat question hasn't come yet. I have one for you.
Okay, please do.
So AI will not raise the bar on the quality of human content that is currently out there.
Oof, that's an interesting one. I think and this is something that I've been thinking about. How is it going to look when there's going to already be a base of good tech defined content out there? But I felt it on a personal level when I started to use it myself, when I realized that once you change from writing general stuff or writing nonsense, and you actually start to put your thinking hat and you want to create something that has a purpose, has a meaning, and needs to go in a certain direction, then that really becomes incredibly challenging. And it's where you see all the stuff that we discussed before, that okay, this is not gonna kill me, it's not gonna go anywhere. On the other hand, it's challenging me more than it has ever before, because now all the stuff that were passive or were, I had to do and fill the time, now a technology can do in a second, and I just have to really think about the stuff that I want, the implications of them. Even if we're talking content, if we're talking image or video, this becomes so much more challenging to express in a great way. So I think this is the first step that's going to take us in the right direction, because everyone that's going to be an active creator of content, whatever that content would be, would go through this phase. Some will see it as a super easy part because they're already more creative. Some are gonna, like myself, are gonna really struggle with it and are gonna have to completely change the way that their mind is wired. But once this hurdle is happening, then that will already push content to the next level. So when it comes to content creation, I think it's gonna really be a beneficial thing. But now there's the other side of, who's gonna decide what kind of content goes out there. How will this content be distributed for the masses, and all the stuff that we touched upon in the podcast, which are still a big question mark. So if this is also done well, and we find ways in which we can activate communities and create certain boundaries and guidelines for content, then this can really be taken to the next level when it comes to output and quality, for sure.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. That was a good one that definitely made me feel a bit hot because I was not ready for it.
You think we were?
Exactly. None of the
Yeah,
questions that you
see,
had were pre-scripted, just so everyone knows. Like, this is all straight off the top of our dome.
Well, yes, but thank you. See, now you made me feel a little bit how you feel, so we're all in the same boat at the moment. But I terribly enjoyed this. Honestly, it was great, and I just want to say a bit of a highlight of the session for me was the realizing actually the importance of building active audiences, active communities, active people in the future. I think this is what really stuck with me throughout our discussion, that the technology is going to keep evolving, and stuff is going to keep being built, but it's more about how do we encourage the people to become part of it and not become led by it. So this would be a highlight for me, and I'd love to quickly, 30 seconds, hear about some highlights for you, something that a key takeaway or something that you want to summarize at the end. Philip, if you can start us off, if you have a highlight. Hopefully you do, otherwise what have we been doing?
So every discussion in this very round is a highlight in itself. So thank you very much for this elaborate and super fun discussion. I think the key point that I'd love to make at the very end is generative AI is here and it's here to stay, but it will not take away human creativity. It will elevate it. And with this elevation comes great potential that we as a society and that we as creators and builders need to work upon to build something amazing that lasts. And that's what we're here for. And that's why we're super excited to work in this space.
Amazing. Andy, tell me.
Basically, one thing that stuck in my head, because we started out this conversation about the question, will all content be individualized? So starting from an idea of having content individualized on a segment 1 level, I actually realized that even a more interesting part will be in the future having content individualized by a community. So not segment 1, but basically segment community, if that's something that we could say. So this is something that I will think about.
Interesting.
Okay, and then next time you're on the episode, we're going to talk about it for sure. Cool. Darryll, your highlight of the first episode.
I quite liked your hot take on the AI will prioritize clickbait. That I think is a serious concern that I think requires a lot of thought, because it's a problem that exists today, and generative AI is just going to continue to exacerbate that problem even further. But I think what's come through from all this again is that everyone should be involved in shaping this future. There's no way at all that any of this stuff should be left to any technology provider anywhere, in terms of the future for what content gets generated, how it gets used, and so on. So I think community is definitely going to be required when it comes to the future of generative AI. We will get things wrong, but we just need to persist with that and believe in what humans can actually do to kind of self-correct all the rubbish and garbage that's out there at the moment.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Great summary right here at the end. And to everyone that's listened, if you liked what you heard, then go hit all of our channels. You can find them in the show notes, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram. DM us if there's topics that you really enjoy and want to hear more about, and we're going to make sure to make those happen. If you have any feedback for us, and please stay tuned for the next chapter.
Thanks very much, Dana.
All right. I think
Thank you very much.
This should be good. Thank you.
Thanks, Dana. Thanks, everyone.